Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's gripping sci-fi story, make sure you hit that like button if you love intense alien encounters, subscribe for more human fear you, HFY, stories that will blow your mind, and comment down below. What would you do if you were alone in the woods surrounded by alien mercenaries? Let's get into it. The boy moved silently between twisted trunks, each step sinking into damp black moss that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence under his worn boots. His name was Ethan, 14 years old, hair shaggy and dark against pale skin smudged with dirt and bark dust. He carried a simple handmade knife strapped to his thigh, and a small satchel bounced against his hip with each step, half filled with mushroom caps and bright orange tubers he had dug up from shallow roots. The forest was silent in the way predators make their territory silent. Shadows pressed inward from all directions. He could hear his own breathing louder than the wind, lungs trembling with a quiet unease he couldn't explain. Birds should have been chirping this early in the morning, or at least the clicking insects nesting high in the black pines. But there was only stillness and that unnatural hush that made his skin crawl. He crouched by a cluster of ferns, flicking his knife expertly to cut away fungus blooms. The colony's supply lines had been raided 3 weeks ago, and until patrols cleared the southern ridge, foraging was the only way to keep their camp from empty stomachs. He wiped sweat from his brow, the metallic tang of old blood lingering under his fingernails. Hunting traps he'd checked earlier were empty. Not even a ground squirrel had dared wander out today. Something crackled softly behind him. He froze, heart pounding so hard he felt it in his throat. Slowly he turned his head. Nothing but dense trunks layered in mist. But the moss quivered slightly where it hadn't before. He stood, adjusting the strap of his satchel. His father always said, if you feel hunted, you probably are. The memory of his father's voice burned through him like cold fire. It had been only 4 months since his father walked into these woods to hunt and never returned. All they found was his plasma pistol and a hand, fingers curled inward like it was trying to hold on to something invisible in death. Ethan swallowed, pushing the thought away, and stepped back from the fern patch. A faint clicking noise rose from the left, then the right, then again behind him. He spun, eyes darting through fog and trunks, hunting for movement. The sound wasn't random like insects or birds. It was rhythmic, patterned, a hunting signal. He gripped his knife tighter, breathing shallow. Then the forest shimmered. They uncloaked in near-perfect unison. 7 towering shapes emerged from invisibility like ghosts rising from mist. Their bodies were covered in matte black carapace armor, shaped to fit reptilian frames with digitigrade legs and wide-muscled chests. Each held a plasma rifle with barrel tips glowing cobalt blue in the dimness. Long snouts lined with ivory teeth jutted from beneath their armored helmets, slitted yellow eyes narrowing as they regarded him with cold calculation. The leader stepped forward. Its scales were darker than the rest, almost obsidian under the flickering light of moss and mist. Its helmet was adorned with a thin line of jagged bone trophies, small humanoid skulls no bigger than Ethan's fist hanging from braided leather cords across its chest plate. It lowered its rifle slightly and spoke in a guttural, rasping language that vibrated in Ethan's bones more than his ears. He couldn't understand a word, but he understood tone, and the tone was amused. The others began to spread out, forming a semicircle with their weapons raised. Ethan glanced around desperately. He was boxed in. The only gap was directly behind him, but even that route twisted sharply into bramble walls and a steep drop-off to jagged rocks 50 feet below. His pulse thundered in his head. His grip tightened on his knife until his knuckles whitened. The leader clicked its mandibles together and pointed at him with one long clawed finger. 2 of the Mercs slung their rifles behind their backs and advanced with restraints uncoiled from their belts, long black cable ties designed for capturing prisoners alive. Ethan backed up instinctively, feeling damp bark press into his spine. "Stay back," he shouted, voice cracking in panic. "Stay back or I'll..." But what would he do? Stab them? They were armored head to toe. One flick of those claws would gut him before he even closed half the distance. Still, he kept the blade angled forward, shaking slightly in his clenched fist. The Merc leader tilted its head as if amused at his defiance. Its slitted eyes flicked away from him for a brief moment, scanning the tree line behind his left shoulder. Its nostrils flared, and for the first time since they appeared, Ethan saw uncertainty ripple across its scaled face. The 2 Mercs closest to him paused, glancing at each other with sudden unease. Their tails flicked low behind their feet, a subconscious gesture Ethan recognized from documentaries about reptilian body language. Meant fear. The leader raised one armored hand, signaling them to stop. Its yellow eyes locked on something beyond Ethan, pupils dilating to wide black voids. Another of the mercs turned and pointed its rifle away from Ethan, toward the dense shadows deeper in the mist-choked forest. It hissed a phrase in its own tongue, urgency dripping from its tone. Ethan felt the ground beneath him vibrate softly, like something impossibly heavy had just shifted its weight nearby. He sucked in a trembling breath, daring to turn his head slightly. Nothing but the shadows of twisted trunks and black pine boughs dripping with fog moisture. But the silence had deepened, turning oppressive and suffocating. One of the mercs barked a command and stepped forward, forcibly grabbing Ethan's forearm. Its grip was so strong his bones ground together under scaled fingers. He yelped in pain, dropping his knife. The merc kicked it aside with a clawed toe, snorting in annoyance. Its helmet visor reflected Ethan's terrified face back at him, warped and stretched like a ghost trapped in black glass. Then the forest exploded with noise. Something moved in the shadows, something massive. Trees creaked under invisible weight. Fog roiled and split apart like a veil torn by claws. The merc gripping Ethan froze completely, eyes wide and slitted nostrils flaring in fear. Every alien in the clearing turned their weapons away from Ethan and trained them on the darkness, the semicircle forgotten, discipline dissolving in primal terror. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs so violently he thought it might burst. The merc holding him released his arm and stepped back, hissing warnings to the others. For the first time since the mercs had appeared, Ethan saw them not as cold, confident killers, but as prey sensing the proximity of something far higher up the food chain. He didn't dare move. His knife lay in the moss near his boot, but he was too petrified to reach for it. His eyes locked on the shifting shadows as something blacker than darkness itself emerged. A deep growl, impossibly low and vibrating through the earth, rolled through the clearing like thunder underwater. Every merc raised their rifles, claws trembling on triggers. Ethan didn't move. Couldn't move. Breath hitched in his throat as he realized, in that frozen moment of absolute silence before chaos, that the mercenaries hadn't come into this forest hunting him. They had wandered into its territory. The creature stepped out of the darkness with a silence that made Ethan's skin crawl. It didn't lumber or stomp like the heavy mercenaries. It simply appeared as if the shadows themselves had coalesced into a shape-given form. At first Ethan couldn't process what he was seeing. Its body was massive, easily twice the size of any of the reptilian mercs, standing on four thick, panther-like limbs that rippled with muscle under matte black scales. Its shoulders rose higher than Ethan's head, and each movement was precise, deliberate, controlled. A tail as long as its body swept behind it, segmented with thick overlapping bone plates that ended in a curved blade, blacker than night, gleaming faintly where the moss light touched it. Its head was long and angular, shaped like some predator's skull dipped in obsidian. Two golden eyes burned beneath armored brows, watching the mercenaries with a detached, calculating intelligence that sent chills racing down Ethan's spine. Its nostrils flared as it sniffed the air, and its maw parted just slightly, revealing jagged teeth the length of Ethan's fingers. Steam rose from its mouth into the cold morning fog. The merc leader barked an order. Ethan didn't understand the words but understood the meaning: attack formation. 4 mercenaries shifted forward, raising their rifles and activating plasma generators with whining electrical hums. Their weapons glowed brighter, coils charging for high-energy bursts capable of melting through vehicle plating. The other 2 mercs flanked left and right, attempting to encircle the creature while the leader remained behind, claws flexing on his heavy rifle grip. The predator watched them with those glowing eyes, its gaze flicking from soldier to soldier with unsettling calm. It didn't growl or rear back to threaten them. It simply stood there, silent, mist curling around its armored limbs like living smoke. One of the mercenaries shouted and fired. A bolt of searing cobalt plasma burst from his rifle, striking the creature square in the chest. Ethan gasped, instinctively flinching away from the bright flare. But when his eyes adjusted, he saw the bolt had dissipated across the creature's chest armor without leaving a mark. The predator tilted its head slightly, staring at the mercenary who fired, like a man contemplating an ant crawling across his boot. Another merc opened fire. Then another. Bolts of plasma screamed through the clearing, searing moss and exploding bark from the trees. The predator moved. Not fast, not in panic. It simply shifted sideways and every plasma bolt missed by inches, slamming into black pine trunks behind it. Then it lunged. It moved so quickly Ethan didn't register the charge until the mercenary's scream ripped through the woods. The creature had crossed 15 meters in a single bound, slamming into the nearest merc with enough force to shatter bone through armor. Its massive jaws clamped down over the mercenary's head and shoulders, biting clean through armored plating, bone, and flesh in a single crunch. The scream cut off instantly, replaced by wet ripping sounds as the predator shook its head once and threw the corpse aside like a broken toy. The other mercenaries roared in rage and fear, unloading plasma fire at point blank. The creature dropped low, almost hugging the ground, moving with the unnatural fluidity of an eel through water. Its tail whipped forward, the blade at the end severing a mercenary's torso from his hips in a single sweeping arc. Blood sprayed across the moss, steaming where it landed. Another merc tried to backpedal, panic overtaking training. The predator leapt sideways, claws flashing out to rake across his chest plate, shredding through alloy and flesh with ease. It didn't even pause to finish him, leaving the alien screaming in the dirt as it pounced on the next. Ethan pressed back against the tree, too terrified to move or make a sound. The fight lasted seconds. One by one the mercs fell, torn apart by claws, crushed under its weight, decapitated by the wicked tail blade. Plasma bolts seared across its scales, leaving scorched marks but failing to penetrate its armored hide. It moved with lethal grace, never wasting a motion, each strike calculated to kill immediately. Finally only the leader remained. He roared, switching his rifle to overload mode, the weapon humming with lethal intent as coils burned white-hot. He raised it and fired at near point-blank range. The plasma blast struck the creature's shoulder and exploded in brilliant white light. Ethan shielded his eyes, ears ringing with the crack of released energy. When he looked again, the predator had been forced back a step, smoke curling from blackened scales. Its golden eyes narrowed at the merc leader with something that almost looked like approval. The leader roared again and charged forward, claws extended, rifle cast aside to rip and tear. He was fast, far faster than Ethan would have believed possible for something that big and armored. But he wasn't fast enough. The predator pivoted on its hind limbs, dodging the first sweeping claw strike, and its jaws snapped out sideways, clamping down over the merc leader's forearm. There was a muffled crunch and the alien screamed, its arm bent backward at an impossible angle as black blood sprayed from torn muscle and shattered bone. The creature wrenched its head down, slamming the merc into the moss with bone-shattering force. Its clawed forelimbs pinned the alien's shoulders to the ground, golden eyes boring into slitted yellow ones with predatory calm. The merc leader gurgled, blood bubbling from his snout. His free hand scrabbled at his belt for a blade or grenade, but the predator's tail rose overhead, gleaming with moisture and blood. With deliberate precision, it drove the blade down through the mercenary's chest, pinning him to the earth. The alien convulsed once, mouth opening in a silent scream, and went still. Silence fell again, heavy and absolute. Steam rose from corpses scattered across the moss like broken mannequins. The predator lifted its head slowly, exhaling a low rumbling growl that vibrated through Ethan's bones. Then it turned and looked at him. For a moment Ethan couldn't breathe. Golden eyes locked on his, burning with an intelligence that wasn't human, but something more primal, older, deeper. The creature sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring as it took a step closer. Each footfall was silent despite its size. Its head lowered until it was level with Ethan's chest, moss so close he could smell warm iron and blood steaming from its fangs. He forced himself to meet its gaze, chest heaving with terror. If it wanted to kill him, he would already be dead. Its eyes flickered down to the small satchel at his hip, then back to his face. It rumbled softly, a sound that somehow wasn't threatening. It felt questioning. Ethan swallowed. His voice came out as a trembling whisper. "Thank you." The creature blinked once, slowly, and for the first time Ethan noticed the faint glow of runic symbols embedded into its shoulder plating. Symbols that matched the colony's defense AI codes. His mind raced. Was this one of the engineered guardians his father told him about? The apex predators humanity had bioengineered to protect frontier worlds from alien threats? Before he could think further, the creature turned away from him, looking deeper into the forest. Its tail lashed once, flicking blood from the blade like water from a knife. It rumbled again, softer this time, almost like a chuffing growl urging him to follow. Then it began to walk away, massive shoulders rippling under armored hide as it melted back into the shadows with silent, effortless grace. Ethan stood trembling, staring after it, torn between terror and wonder. Finally he bent down, picked up his fallen knife with shaking fingers and took a step forward. Whatever it was, wherever it was going, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was safer following it than staying here alone. He tightened the strap of his satchel across his chest and hurried after the creature, deeper into the mist and darkness, leaving the corpses cooling in silence behind him. Ethan's feet sank into damp moss as he hurried after the creature, trying to keep his breathing quiet despite the hammering of his heart. The fog thickened between twisted trunks, swirling around the predator's massive shoulders and bone-plated tail. It moved with a silent, fluid grace that seemed to fold the forest around it. Occasionally it would pause, nostrils flaring to test the air, golden eyes flicking back to ensure he followed before continuing onward. They traveled deeper into the forest than Ethan had ever dared go. Every tree here was ancient, their trunks thick as houses, bark blackened and scarred from centuries of storms and lightning strikes. Pale fungi sprouted in jagged shelves along the roots, casting faint green light across the moss. High above, unseen nocturnal birds gave shrill cries that echoed like distant screams. Ethan clutched his knife tighter with each step, feeling smaller and smaller in the oppressive gloom. After what felt like hours but could not have been more than minutes, the predator stopped. It raised its head, sniffing the air, then lowered into a crouch so smoothly that Ethan almost missed the movement. He froze beside it, his breath hitching as he scanned the shadows for danger. That was when he heard them. Voices. Not guttural and rasping like the reptilian mercenaries. These were human voices, male, panicked, shouting over one another. Ethan crept forward, placing his feet carefully to avoid snapping twigs or disturbing brittle fungus caps. Between two massive roots he saw them. 3 human men knelt in a clearing surrounded by alien mercenaries. These mercs were different from the reptilians. Insectoid, tall and narrow, chitinous limbs ending in sharp clawed feet. Their bodies were covered in dark green and rust-red armored plating, and their heads bore multiple gleaming black eyes that reflected the moss light like polished obsidian. Each carried a slender plasma lance crackling faintly at the tip. The men knelt with their hands bound behind their backs, their faces streaked with dirt and blood. Ethan recognized 2 of them as scouts from the colony outpost. The third was Captain Reeves, the man who had trained Ethan's father before he died. His once proud face was twisted in pain, a deep gash across his cheek oozing blood into his graying beard. One of the insectoid mercs stepped forward, speaking in a clicking language that grated against Ethan's ears. It gestured at Captain Reeves with a spindly claw, then drew a long slender blade from its hip sheath. Reeves raised his chin defiantly, glaring up at the alien without fear despite his wounds. The predator beside Ethan shifted, its tail curling forward until the blade hovered inches above the moss. Golden eyes burned in the fog as it assessed the mercenaries silently. Ethan glanced at it, his mind racing. Would it attack? Could it save them? He felt something stir within his chest, something hot and defiant that burned away the numb terror clinging to his ribs. The insectoid merc raised its blade, aiming for Captain Reeves' throat. The predator moved. One moment it was crouched beside Ethan. The next, it exploded into the clearing in a blur of matte black scales and bone blades. Its tail lashed out first, the curved tip slicing clean through the mercenary's midsection, severing chitin armor and torso with equal ease. The alien's top half slid sideways, collapsing into the moss with a wet chittering gasp as its legs crumpled separately. The other mercenaries shrieked in alarm, mandibles clacking frantically as they raised their plasma lances. Bolts of searing energy burst through the fog, turning moss to blackened glass where they struck. The predator dodged left, its massive claws gouging deep furrows through dirt as it moved. Plasma fire tracked after it, missing by fractions as it darted between the mercs with impossible speed. A mercenary tried to swing its lance like a spear. The predator caught the shaft in its jaws and bit down, severing it with a metallic crunch before slamming its clawed forelimbs into the alien's chest. Chitin shattered under the blow, its body folding inward with a sickening crack as it collapsed. Another merc swung around behind the predator, aiming its lance at the exposed joints behind its forelimbs. But before it could thrust, the predator's tail snapped backward, the bone blade punching through the alien's thorax and out between its front eyes. It lifted the corpse effortlessly, flicking it aside to slam into a tree trunk with a muffled thud. The remaining mercs broke formation, panic overriding any semblance of discipline. They scattered across the clearing, trying to regroup and encircle the predator from multiple angles. It turned in place, eyes flicking from target to target, calculating and precise. One merc fired directly into its chest. The bolt struck, sending sparks flying as armor scales blackened and split. For the first time, the predator roared, a deep, resonating sound like a landslide tearing through bedrock. It charged, jaws gaping wide to clamp down over the merc's head and shoulders, biting clean through. It shook the corpse once and dropped it before pivoting to face the last 2. Ethan watched in silent awe and horror as the creature slaughtered them with mechanical efficiency. Each movement wasted no energy, each strike killed instantly. When the final merc fell, its head separated cleanly from its thorax. The predator stood still in the steaming carnage, golden eyes scanning for any remaining threats. Captain Reeves coughed, spitting blood onto the moss as he stared up at the creature. The other two men knelt frozen in terror. The predator lowered its head until it was inches from Reeves' face. Ethan watched as the captain closed his eyes, breathing shallow, waiting for death. But the predator did not kill him. Instead, it sniffed him once, then turned away, tail curling low to the ground in a relaxed posture. It rumbled softly, a low sound vibrating through the clearing like distant thunder. Reeves opened his eyes, staring after it with bewildered wonder. Ethan stepped forward into the clearing, knife still clutched in his trembling fist. Captain Reeves looked up sharply, his eyes widening as he recognized the boy. "Ethan?" he rasped, voice hoarse with pain. "What in God's name, what is that thing?" Ethan glanced at the predator as it moved back to him, its massive bulk parting fog like a ship cutting through waves. He swallowed, feeling adrenaline burn through his limbs. "I don't know," he whispered. "But it saved me. And now it saved you." The predator lowered its head, golden eyes flicking between Ethan and the three men. It rumbled again, softer this time, almost like a purr. The sound was so deep Ethan felt it resonate through his chest. One of the scouts spoke up, voice trembling. It's not attacking us?" Ethan shook his head. "No. I think it's protecting us." The creature raised its head, sniffing the air with sudden urgency. Its ears flicked back, jaws parting in a silent snarl. It turned toward the northern treeline, body tensing with predatory anticipation. Ethan followed its gaze and saw flickering blue lights in the fog, the distinct glow of plasma torches sweeping through the undergrowth. More mercs. Reinforcements. The predator looked down at Ethan, golden eyes narrowing. It rumbled again, louder this time, and took a step forward before pausing to glance back at him. Ethan understood the silent command. "Follow." He turned back to Captain Reeves and the two scouts, his voice low and urgent. "Get up. Now. We need to move." Reeves groaned as he pushed himself to his feet, clutching his wounded arm. The scouts staggered up beside him, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Ethan turned away from them and followed the predator as it slipped back into the trees, deeper into the dark, mist-choked forest. Behind them, the flickering blue lights grew brighter as dozens of alien mercenaries moved into the clearing, weapons humming with lethal intent. Ethan didn't look back. He only kept his eyes locked on the creature's massive, armored form ahead of him, trusting its silent, primal confidence to guide them through the shadows. And for the first time since his father's death, he felt something like hope burning in his chest, cold and bright against the terror that had ruled his life for so long. They disappeared into the darkness together, leaving the flickering plasma lights and fresh corpses behind. They moved swiftly through the mist-bound forest, Ethan's heart racing as he followed the predator's silent lead. The two scouts stumbled behind him, supporting Captain Reeves between them. Each time Ethan looked back, he saw the flicker of blue plasma torches weaving through the trees in pursuit. The mercenaries were gaining, their guttural commands echoing off black pine trunks like angry ghosts. The predator halted at the edge of a ravine, its massive shoulders flexing under thick armored scales. It turned its golden gaze to Ethan, then down into the gorge below. Ethan peered over the edge and saw dense fog curling across jagged stones and fallen trees far beneath them. A stream glittered faintly under the moss light, its surface broken by sharp boulders. It was too steep to climb down safely, but the predator didn't seem concerned. It looked back at Ethan, its eyes narrowing. It rumbled low in its chest, a sound vibrating through the ground. Ethan swallowed hard as understanding dawned. It wanted them to climb onto its back. "Do it," Captain Reeves rasped behind him, his voice rough with pain and fatigue. "Whatever that thing is, it's the only reason we're alive." Ethan nodded, sheathing his knife and stepping forward. The predator lowered itself onto its haunches, armored plates flexing as it angled its back to make mounting easier. Ethan swung his leg over, straddling its broad spine just behind its shoulder ridges. Its scales were surprisingly warm beneath his palms, heat radiating from powerful muscles coiled under armor. The scouts lifted Reeves carefully onto the creature's back behind Ethan, then clambered up themselves, gripping its plated ridges for balance. The predator rose, its massive frame shifting with silent, effortless strength. Ethan could hear the mercenaries closing in, weapons humming with charged plasma. The predator turned its head slightly, golden eyes meeting Ethan's. In that fleeting gaze, Ethan saw something beyond predatory instinct. Something ancient and deeply intelligent. something that recognized him not as cargo or prey but as kin. Then it leapt. They soared into open air, the ground vanishing beneath them as the ravine swallowed them whole. The scout screamed. Reeves groaned in pain. Ethan clenched his fists around the armored plates as wind howled past his ears. The predator landed on an outcropping halfway down, its claws digging into stone before it leapt again, bounding from rock to rock with impossible agility despite their combined weight. Within seconds they reached the bottom. The creature landed in a crouch that shook the earth, then sprang forward at a full sprint, weaving between boulders and fallen trunks with shocking speed. Fog blurred past them in gray and black streaks, the predator's paws striking earth with rhythmic, ground-shaking thuds. Ethan pressed his forehead against its warm scales, feeling its powerful heart beating like a war drum beneath him. They emerged into a wide clearing at the gorge floor, moss glowing pale green under the high canopy. The predator skidded to a halt near a massive tree whose trunk had split open long ago, forming a dark hollow. It lowered itself to allow them down. Ethan slid off first, turning to help Captain Reeves dismount safely. The captain collapsed to one knee, gasping, his wounded arm cradled against his chest. The predator sniffed the air, ears twitching, then prowled toward the hollow trunk. It nosed aside a veil of vines and stepped inside, disappearing into darkness. Ethan felt fear coil through him. Fear of being abandoned, of losing the only shield that had kept them alive. But a moment later, its massive head reappeared, golden eyes glowing in the shadows. It chuffed softly, beckoning. Ethan helped Reeves to his feet. Together with the scouts, they limped toward the hollow and ducked inside. The space was surprisingly wide, a natural cave formed by twisted roots and collapsed earth beneath the ancient tree. Bioluminescent fungus lit the interior in pale turquoise, revealing smooth stone floors and thick root walls. The predator lay curled at the far side, tail tucked close, its golden eyes half-lidded as it watched them enter. Reeves sank to the floor with a pained grunt, leaning back against the roots. The scouts collapsed beside him, trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Ethan remained standing, staring at the predator with a mix of fear and wonder. Do you know what it is?" one of the scouts asked, his voice hoarse. Ethan shook his head slowly. "No. But my father told me once, before he died, that the first colonists engineered guardians. Apex predators to protect new worlds from threats humans couldn't face alone. They said the project was shut down decades ago, too dangerous, too unpredictable." He stepped closer to the creature, eyes locked on its massive, armored skull. "But maybe some of them survived. Maybe some of them remembered." The predator lifted its head slightly, sniffing him again. Its golden eyes narrowed, not with aggression, but with a calm focus that made Ethan's chest tighten. It rumbled softly, a sound so deep he felt it in his bones. Captain Reeves coughed, wiping blood from his lips. "It saved us. Whatever it is, it's on our side." Outside, the echo of plasma torches grew louder. The mercenaries were sweeping the ravine, methodically searching every possible hiding place. The scouts tensed, gripping each other in fear. Reeves turned his weary gaze to Ethan, eyes shadowed with pain and regret. "We can't fight them," he rasped. "Not with what we have. We're out of ammo, out of strength, we're done." Ethan felt something rise in his chest, a slow, cold fury that burned away fear and despair like fire melting ice. He turned to the predator, meeting its gaze without flinching. It tilted its head slightly, studying him with those glowing eyes, waiting. "Are you with us?" Ethan asked softly. "Will you fight for us?" For a moment there was only silence. Then the creature rose to its full height, its armored shoulders scraping against the cave roof. Its tail lashed once, blade gleaming in the turquoise glow. It rumbled, low and powerful, vibrating the ground beneath Ethan's feet. He didn't need words to understand. It would fight. For him. For them all. The scouts stared up at it with wide, tear-filled eyes. Reeves managed a broken smile despite his pain. "I guess humanity's best weapons weren't ships or plasma cannons after all," he whispered. "It was always us. What we create. What we tame." Outside, voices shouted in alien tongues as mercenaries approached the hollow's entrance. Blue plasma torch light flickered against the vines and roots, casting dancing shadows across the cave walls. The predator stepped forward, massive chest expanding as it inhaled deeply. Its tail curved forward, blade gleaming with anticipation. Its golden eyes burned brighter, locking onto Ethan one final time. Ethan reached out and laid his trembling hand against its armored brow. "Thank you," he whispered. Then it roared. The sound shook the earth, echoing through the ravine like 1,000 storms colliding. The vines exploded outward as the creature charged, smashing through them in a blur of black scales and bone blades. Ethan staggered back from the force of its passing, heart pounding with wild, savage hope. Outside, mercenaries screamed as the predator tore into their ranks. Plasma fire lit the mist in flashes of blue and white, illuminating glimpses of claws rending chitin armor, of its tail blade severing limbs and torsos in brutal arcs. The scouts clutched each other, their eyes wide with horror and awe. Captain Reeves struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the cave wall, eyes burning with renewed defiance. Ethan stood at the cave mouth, watching as the predator slaughtered the mercenaries with effortless, ruthless grace. Each kill was precise, each movement calculated for maximum lethality. Blood sprayed across moss and stone, steaming in the cold morning air. Finally, as the last merc fell, gurgling its final breath into the moss, the predator stood still in the carnage, chest heaving. Its golden eyes turned back to Ethan, calm and unblinking. For a long, silent moment, they regarded each other, boy and beast, human and apex predator, two creatures bound by blood and survival. Then the predator turned away, tail flicking once, and loped into the shadows, disappearing between twisted black pine trunks without a sound. Ethan felt tears burning in his eyes as he whispered into the empty forest, "We are not prey. Not while you walk beside us." Behind him, Captain Reeves placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Let's go home, son." Together, they turned away from the clearing littered with corpses and blood, walking back into the mist-bound forest with renewed hope burning in their hearts. For humanity had always been strong. But with guardians like that at their side, they were unstoppable.